Today we're going to talk about DeMello's first chapter in her book, An Introduction to Human Animal Studies. This chapter does provide an overview of what is involved in human animal studies. And so if you haven't read this chapter already, first I would say go ahead and go back and read the chapter before watching this, because this is just going to hit a few of the the kind of the important parts of the chapter, and it's not going to explain it thoroughly enough. So you do need to read the chapter and not just watch kind of the presentation on the chapter. These are very abbreviated lectures. In class, I would probably do um, a more in-depth discussion with you, but I'm going to try to keep this video to less than 10 minutes. All right, so first we're going to start with just a little bit about our author, Margot DeMello. You can see here that she is a cultural anthropologist, which means she's going to write this book from kind of a social science, sociology, anthropological perspective. That's going to be a little bit different than a book that's written from a different disciplinary perspective. So for example, human animal studies is an interdisciplinary field. You could have media scholars talking about animals in the media and how humans consume different shows and television and film about animals. You could probably have an English children's literature expert talk about children's literature and the use of animal characters in children's literature. A historian would potentially talk about all the different historical roles that animals have played in human society. So this is all to say that our text is going to be coming from more of a sociological, cultural, anthropological point of view. And then you can see a little bit about some of the things that Margot DeMello has done. Okay, so here we see that a basic overall definition of what human animal studies includes. So it's an interdisciplinary field. We just talked about what that means, that this is going to draw from all kinds of different subject areas and academic fields of knowledge, different ways of studying and understanding a topic. Explores the spaces that animals occupy in human social and cultural worlds and the interactions humans have with them. So stop to just think about that a second. Explores the spaces that animals occupy in human social and cultural worlds. What isn't part of the human cultural and social worlds? Everything is part of human social and cultural worlds, at least from a human perspective. And all the interactions that humans and non-human animals may have with each other. Central to this field is an exploration of the ways in which animal lives intersect with human societies. So, you know, if we were just to stop for just a moment and think about what all that includes, it's very, very large, very, very wide expanse of topics fall within human animal studies. We're just going to be touching on a few of those throughout the semester. But if we think back to your discussion board posts and think about some of the topics you guys wrote about most recently in the first discussion, many of you talked about pets. That certainly falls within the intersection of animals and humans. We had at least some post about religious or spiritual practice, so that if you think about Hinduism and I think the example from our discussion board was that cows are considered sacred or are divine. You think about indigenous spirituality, Native American spirituality, and the animal totems that were frequently part of that. If you think about Christianity, there's kind of different references to animals. One might be that the lion shall lie down with the sheep. So these kind of, and that means something in the context in which it's said in the religious text. So some people talked about food products, apparel products. Alice Walker talked about the horse that was basically her neighbor. So non-human animals are our neighbors, and we share space together. Sedaris talks about his encounter with a wild fox, which is becoming increasingly tame. These are all fall within this very broad spectrum of human-animal studies. It is worth noting that particularly in the last 20 years, and especially in the last 10 years, there are quite a few college programs that now focus on human-animal studies. So I just linked us over to the Animals and Society Institute, which is, we'll come back to this website quite a bit throughout the semester. And here we're just seeing a basic map of places where there are human-animal studies degree programs, either certificate programs. Here we have undergraduate minors. We might have bachelor's degree programs, and then graduate programs. So there are a lot of different places to go and learn about human-animal studies. Okay. Moving forward just a little, if you just think about kind of in your own kind of daily routine, we can also just think, often we just don't take the time to think about the ways that our lives intersect, that human lives intersect with non-human animals. But, you know, some kind of off-the-cuff examples of non-human animals in the media, we might think about, you know, the cat videos on social media as an example here. We may think about news stories that involve non-human animals. So last year in the fall, we learned about the wildfires in Australia that were doing damage and killing and injuring the koala bears. And this became a big story, right? This was part of the big story last fall, was all the koala bears and the wildlife being killed in the Australian fires. And currently we have record-breaking wildfires in California that are probably also impacting the wildlife. Because there's so many news stories going on right now, we may not hear as much about that. All right, so the companion part to human-animal studies. So I'll frequently talk about human-animal studies in this class. Whoops, I went too far. Human-animal studies is what we've just been talking about, and that was that first definition, basically where humans and intersects with non-human animals in their social and cultural spaces. There's another field out there, and it's important to start learning the distinctions between the two different categories of human-animal studies and critical animal studies. Critical animal studies is a smaller set or a smaller part of human-animal studies. And it's defined in the DeMello text as an academic field of study dedicated to the abolition of animal exploitation, oppression, and domination. So within human-animal studies, some folks are clear and upfront about their goal. And the goal here is the abolition of human exploitation, oppression, and domination. So these folks have a clear goal within an active political movement. Whereas human-animal studies might include some folks who do embrace animal advocacy in some ways, but they also believe, some of them believe in this notion that we should be dispassionate in our intellectual inquiry, and we shouldn't get too attached to an agenda, and we shouldn't be advocating for something because we should just study it in its most neutral, dispassionate manner. And so human-animal studies might include those folks who are not going to say this is wrong and we should end it. But it may also include some folks who would fall within critical animal studies who say we're for the abolition of human exploitation, oppression, and domination. So keep that in mind, that critical animal studies and human animal studies are not exactly the same thing, even though they overlap quite a bit.